The answer is quite simple. The United States does not want to stop the wars. In fact, the United States is the enabler of so many wars around the world. It's really tragic. When it comes to the war in Gaza right now, if the United States stopped providing munitions to Israel, the war would end in a day. This war literally continues only because Israel gets munitions from the United States. It's not even out of stockpiles, it's out of new deliveries all the time. So if the United States took the choice perforce, the fighting would stop. Of course, if the United States took political decisions, not vetoing UN Security Council resolutions, abiding by UN Security Council resolutions calling for a two-state solution, I think that on political grounds, the war in Gaza could end essentially immediately. I talked about other wars, just to mention them quickly. The war in Syria, which has gone on since 2011, is a US regime change operation gone wrong, as most of them do, in a very deep way. It was decided by the US and some of the regional partners that they would bring down Bashar al-Assad. And President Obama gave a famous finding, the Timber Sycamore operation of the CIA to bring down Assad. It failed, but it has caused 12 years of nonstop war. And I know through my work in the UN that that war could have ended in 2012, but the US blocked the solution to the war. There was an agreement to end the war, but the United States said, no, Assad must go or the war continues. Similarly, I talked about the Ukraine war. This is a completely misunderstood war because of the US narrative, which is false. This is a war caused by the US overthrow of the Ukrainian government in February 2014, followed by, and for the purpose of, and followed by an attempt until today to extend NATO to the border of Russia. And Russia, understandably, in my view, completely understandably, would not have it. And so this is a war over NATO enlargement. If the United States said any moment, NATO will not expand to Ukraine and to Georgia, by the way, which was put as a pair with Ukraine, the war would end. In fact, it almost did end in April 2022, weeks after the start of Russia's special military operation, because that whole invasion in February 2022 was designed not to take over the country, but to force Ukraine to the negotiating table, which it did. Zelensky and the Ukrainian government negotiated a peace with Russia based on neutrality, and the United States stepped in and said, no way, you're signing that. And the war has continued since then. So these are wars of choice. They are wars, in my view, of an American empire, a very misguided one. I'm an American. This is a government that is not serving my purposes at all. It's wasting my money and it's killing a lot of people. So I find it all disgusting. I can tell you, and I don't mean to sound absurdly personal about it, but no government's ever asked me about this in the sense that these issues are not publicly debated in the United States. The causes of the wars are hidden from view. The narratives officially are lies. The votes on funding the wars are pushed through Congress almost without public debate. And so public opinion plays almost no role. So this is another sad part of this. But the long answer to your short question is these are wars of choice that the United States could stop immediately, but for various political and geopolitical reasons, chooses not to stop at the great cost for humanity and at the great cost for risks of further escalation.
So I'd like to pick up on the cost side of things. Clearly, you know, the United States has had to pay a hefty price tag in most of its wars, to the tune of trillions, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, etc. And at home, there's a lot of political pressures that are being exerted. Now, specifically as it pertains to the Israeli-Gaza war, these pressures have really flooded into the streets, maybe not to that degree with respect to the Ukraine or some of the other wars, but with the Israeli-Gaza war, I mean, we've seen manifestations in LA, in New York, even from all sorts of communities, Palestinian, even Jewish communities, all kinds of communities. And some of them are basically starting to question verbally, like never before, these kinds of policies that the U.S. administration, is undertaking. I think even the State Department has had some may I call it clandestine, because they had their faces covered in front of the White House manifestations so that they're not under any risk, but kind of to also object to the current policies of the United States. Would you be able to kind of shed a little bit to your opinion on how much that's playing a part in what appears to be a shift in U.S. policy from October 7th to today? And is that trend going to continue going forward in your opinion, or is there something that's going to hamper it and not allow it to go any further?
So I think there are two parts to the question, if I might. First is a bit about the costs financially, and then the cost politically. The costs financially of the U.S. wars of choice in the 21st century really dated to 9/11, if we might: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Ukraine, and many other smaller wars as well. Come to, according to different estimates, somewhere between $5 and $8 trillion. Even for a macroeconomist like myself, that's not small change. This is 25% or 33% from a quarter to a third of the U.S. annual output. Now, the reason that these wars have been able to be prosecuted at such cost and with no positive results for America or for the world is that they've been run on credit. If an American president said, "We want to fight the war, we're going to raise your taxes to do it," the wars would end in one moment. So these are wars that are fought on deficit finance. The debt has been rising. The U.S. debt, public debt, that is, the debt owed by the Treasury, measured as a share of our U.S. national income, has increased from about 35% of our national income to about 100% of our national income between the year 2000 and today. This is a huge increase of debt, but it is not noticed up front because it is adding to the tab that's coming due. It's not an immediate burden. And similarly, of course, if there was even a breath of anything like a draft of actually Americans serving in any of these wars by a draft, they would also end in a moment, because the public doesn't support any of this. But these are wars that presidents are able to carry out essentially on their own personal authority, with a bit financed by Congress. Why? Because it's not noticed by the American people, and it's very popular with the military-industrial complex. After all, these wars are big business. This is no question part of the story. You have Boeing, you have Lockheed Martin, You have Northrop Grumman, you have General Dynamics, you have Raytheon, 5 big companies that have hundreds of billions of dollars of arms contracts. And they spread that back to Congress, especially to the Armed Services Committee. So we have a can I say a shitstorm in our politics because it's so corrupt now, and even I shouldn't say even Biden, who is not a very impressive politician to say the least, in trying to make the case for aid, actually doesn't make the case in terms of ethics, morality, safety, security, but he shows where the weapons are being produced and where the jobs are in the different congressional districts. So it's pretty crude stuff. Now, again, the American people would not tolerate any direct burden of this. So all of this is done on the side. Most people don't follow and don't really feel the budget deficits, except recently in the last couple of years, interest rates have gone up a lot. US credit ratings have come down. House prices, mortgage costs are going up. So people are starting to also even make that financial link, even though all of this is debt financed. They're saying, you know, I'm feeling the pain from this. And of course, if they factor in the trillions of debt that is going to have to be paid in the future by taxes or by inflation, they would feel it even more. But this is starting to be felt, and it's one of the reasons why Congress pushed back in recent months, not just what they would normally do of signing the bill, but a lot of congressmen saying the price is too high, even in a financial sense. Now, when you come to the political ramifications, which you asked about, this is absolutely fascinating, because the assumption of American politics for the last 50 years has been that it is always right for any politician to hone completely to Israel's point of view, because you have the Israel lobby, you have AIPAC, you have campaign contributions, you have not only Jewish voters, but you have Christian fundamentalist voters who, for their own theological reason, are even sometimes more strongly pro-Israel, quote unquote, if only to accelerate the Armageddon, by the way. But they're more pro-Israel in their voting than even the Jews sometimes. But the point is, the assumption of American politics, the training of politicians, is never show any space with Israel. And Biden, who's an old man and operates, I'd say, about 30 years out of date, and has a training that reflects the 1990s. This is his position, which is standing up for Israel no matter what. And so that's the normal politics. What has been the huge surprise for these politicians, I think a shock actually, is that young people aren't buying into it. So we have a tremendous generational change. It's not a change across the board in public opinion. It's really the under 35s primarily, our students on the campuses. Our students are looking at mass murder and saying, what the hell is this? Why are we complicit in this? And when they then protest, the donors to the university and the congressmen go crazy. You know, how dare the students say something against Israel? And it's been a huge shock to the older powers that be in the United States that this doesn't play. And Biden is finding he's losing support, a lot of support right now, by virtue of this knee-jerk, unconditional support for Israel, which has always been the formula for a Biden-like politician. It doesn't work anymore. This generational change is a very deep one. It's not going to go away. There's very little sympathy among younger people, and that's both Jews and non-Jews, by the way, though, of course, the proportions will vary in different groups. but a lot of young Jews are incredibly unhappy about what Israel is doing. And our student bodies more generally on the campuses are really unhappy. And the campuses are the administrators and the donors who have always been like the US politicians, 100% pro-Israel, unquestioned, are extremely surprised at what's happening right now.